She just wanted to be loved, but was discarded for being too good for him. A cold billionaire with deep traumas and a fear of real commitment. When he saw her with another, something in him exploded, and it turned into an obsession. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment saying where you are listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. Isabel Lentz was the kind of woman the world learned to ignore. Discreet, reserved, intensely silent. She was 32 years old and carried her purity not as a burden, but as a form of resistance. She had grown up in the shadows of a religious family, marked by tragedy in rural North Carolina, where virginity was a currency of moral value, but also a hiding place for wounds that had never healed. She refused to give herself away out of obligation or neediness. For her, the body was a sacred territory, guarded by something deeper than fear, awareness, choice, survival. At 15, she had witnessed her father hit her mother for the last time. On that cold July pre-dawn when the man arrived drunk and violent, Isabel stood between them. The surprised look on her father's face upon seeing his scrawny daughter standing before him, protecting his bloodied wife, was the last memory she kept of him. The next day, he left for work at the tobacco farm and never returned. Some said he went to New York City to try his luck. Others whispered he had died on some lost highway. Isabel never wanted to know the truth. Her mother, Constance, never fully recovered. She lived as a shadow of her former self, whispering prayers and asking for forgiveness for sins she never committed. She died when Isabel turned 22, leaving only a simple house and a certainty in her daughter. She would never depend on any man to survive. That was how Isabel arrived in New York City, with a suitcase of old clothes and a degree in education earned through great sacrifice. She worked as a teacher in public schools on the outskirts for 5 years until she discovered her true calling. A student had arrived with purple marks on her arm, and when Isabel tried to talk to her, the 8-year-old girl said matter-of-factly, "My dad hit me because I spilled the beans." In that moment, something broke inside her, and something also ignited. She left the classroom and dove headfirst into the non-profit sector. She started as a volunteer, then became a coordinator, until she finally landed a position at the NGO Women in Motion, one of the city's most respected organizations for sheltering victims of domestic violence. It was there, amidst traumas and reconstructions, that Isabel found her strength. Seeing broken women rise again gave her the certainty that she was in the right place, making the difference she had dreamed of since she was a girl. She lived in a small apartment in Greenwich Village, shared with Carla, a social worker who had become her best friend. She had a simple routine. She woke up at 6, drank strong black coffee, took the packed subway, and spent the entire day caring for those in need. At night, she would return home, prepare dinner while watching a series on her old laptop, and read before sleeping. On weekends, she visited her Aunt Rose, the only relative she still had contact with, or walked through the city park. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was hers, built brick by brick, without depending on anyone. At 32, she had never truly fallen in love. She had a few superficial relationships in college, but always stopped before things got serious. Men found her too complicated, too closed off, too demanding. She thought they simply didn't understand that some things couldn't be bought, forced, or easily won. Everything changed on a cold June night when she unknowingly confronted the man who financed the NGO's most important charity event of the year, Kale Monbray. The annual Women in Motion Gala was always held at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, where the wealthiest donors gathered to showcase their contributions and, discreetly, network. Isabel detested those events. She found it obscene to spend fortunes on a party while women slept in overcrowded shelters. But Margaret, the NGO's president, always insisted she go. "You need to be there, Izzy. You're our human face. When they see you talking about the work, they open their wallets more easily," the 60-year-old woman would say, as pragmatic as only someone who has worked with donations for decades could be. Isabel put on the only formal dress she owned, a simple navy blue one she had bought on sale years before, and took the flight to Miami feeling out of place. She arrived at the hotel when the party was already in full swing. Ambient music, waiters circulating with trays of champagne, women covered in jewels, and men in suits discussing business. It was a world she knew, but to which she had never belonged. She was near the bar, sipping an orange juice and observing the crowd, when Margaret approached with a radiant smile. "Izzy, I need you to meet our biggest donor this year. He just doubled our fundraising goal." Before she could protest, Isabel was dragged across the ballroom to a circle of men who were talking animatedly. As they got closer, she saw him. Cale Montbray was unlike any man she had ever met. Tall, broad-shouldered, he had that presence that made people turn their heads when he passed. His dark hair was combed back, revealing a face with strong features, a defined jawline, penetrating dark eyes, a mouth that seemed sculpted. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that cost more than Isabel's annual salary. He was 35 and looked like someone who had never lost a battle. "Mr. Montbray, I'd like to introduce you to Isabel Lenz, our field coordinator. She's the one who works directly with the women we help," Margaret said with the reverent tone she used with major donors. Cale turned to her and their eyes met. For a moment, Isabel forgot how to breathe. There was something magnetic about that man, an intensity that seemed to suck all the air from around him. He extended his hand and she noticed that his fingers were long, elegant, but there were almost imperceptible calluses, a sign that he hadn't always lived just behind executive desks. "A pleasure, Isabel. Margaret has told me a lot about your work," he said, and his voice was exactly as she had imagined it would be, deep, controlled, with a faint New York accent. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Montbray. It's always good to meet those who truly care about our cause," she replied, trying to sound professional despite her racing heart. "Cale, please, and tell me, what exactly do you do at the organization?" Isabel began to explain about the field work, about how she supported the women from their arrival at the shelter to their reintegration into society. She spoke with passion, gesturing gently, and noticed that he was watching her with complete attention. It wasn't the polite gaze of someone networking. It was genuine. "It must be quite a challenging job," he said after a few minutes. "It is, but it's also rewarding. To see a woman who arrived broken manage to rebuild her life, to smile again, to regain her self-esteem, that's priceless. And you managed to stay optimistic, even seeing so much violence, so much cruelty?" There was something strange in his tone, a shadow that passed through his dark eyes. Isabel frowned slightly. "I do, because I also see a lot of strength, a lot of resistance. Women are more resilient than we imagine. They just need an opportunity." "An interesting perspective," he murmured, taking a sip of the whiskey he was holding. The conversation was interrupted by a grey-haired man who approached to talk to Cale about investments. Margaret took Isabel to meet other donors, but for the rest of the night, she found herself looking for him in the crowd. It was later, when the party was ending and she was waiting for the elevator to go up to the room the NGO had reserved for her, that the first clash occurred. "Excuse me." The deep voice made her turn. Cale was there, tie loosened, looking less formal than before. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" They rode the elevator together in silence. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, where Isabel's room was, he followed her down the hallway. "What did you want to talk to me about?" she asked, stopping in front of her room door. "I have a proposal. Our company is expanding its social initiatives. I'd like to hire you as a consultant. Your salary would be substantially higher than what you receive at the NGO. Isabel stared at him, surprised. "Why would I do that?" "Because you could help many more people. With our resources, you could triple the impact of your work. And what exactly would my role be? To structure our social responsibility programs, especially in the area of protecting women." She shook her head. "I'm not interested. I prefer to stay where I am." "You'd rather continue earning a pittance to care for 24 women a month when you could earn 10 times more and care for hundreds?" His tone changed. It became more direct, almost impatient. "I'd rather continue doing real work, instead of becoming a marketer for a rich man who wants to clear his conscience by donating some pocket change." The words came out sharper than she intended. Cale narrowed his eyes. Pocket change? Do you have any idea how much your NGO has received from me this year alone? I do, yes. $800,000, which for you must be what you spend on wine in a week. He took a step closer. Isabel could smell his masculine cologne, subtle and expensive. You don't know me well enough to make that kind of judgment. I know your type. Powerful men who think money solves everything, buys everything, controls everything. And what type would you be? The idealistic little girl who thinks she can save the world with good intentions. At least I don't have to buy my relevance. The silence that followed was charged with tension. They stared at each other in the deserted hotel hallway, and Isabel could feel his anger, but also something else, something dangerous. You're very naive if you think good intentions are enough in this world, he said, his voice low and controlled. And you're very cynical if you think only money matters. Cynicism is what keeps people alive. What a sad life yours must be. Cale was silent for a moment, studying her face. Sadder than you can imagine, he said finally, with a sincerity that caught her off guard. Isabel felt something strange in her chest, a pang of something she couldn't identify. Compassion? Curiosity? Good night, Mr. Montbray. Thank you for the offer. But my answer is still no. She turned to open her room door, but his voice stopped her. Isabel. She looked over her shoulder. This isn't over. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And there was something in his eyes that made her heart race again. She entered the room and leaned against the closed door, trying to understand what had just happened. Cale Montbray was everything she despised in a man, arrogant, controlling, thinking he could buy anything. But he was also magnetic. There was an intensity in him that both drew her in and scared her at the same time. She took a long shower, trying to forget the conversation. But when she finally lay down in the hotel bed, all she could see were those dark eyes watching her in the hallway. 3 weeks later, she was at her desk at the NGO's headquarters when Margaret appeared with a worried expression. Izzy, we need to talk. They sat in the small meeting room. Margaret seemed nervous, fidgeting with the papers in front of her. We've received an unusual proposal. The Montbray Corporation wants to fund a new project of ours, a larger shelter with capacity for 100 women, complete structure, expanded staff. The investment would be $5 million. Isabel felt her stomach sink. And what's the condition? You would be the general coordinator of the project. You would work directly with the company, providing monthly reports to Mr. Montbray. Margaret, Izzy, you don't understand. 5 million. We could help 10 times more women. We'd have specialized psychologists, lawyers, vocational courses. It would be revolutionary. Isabel remained silent, processing the information. It was a tempting offer, but it was also obvious that it was a way for Cale Montbray to force her to work with him. He's trying to buy me, she said finally. Or he's genuinely interested in your work. Izzy, you saw how he looked at you during your presentation at the party. It wasn't just professional interest. Isabel's cheeks grew warm. That's precisely why I can't accept. At least think about it. We have a meeting with him tomorrow to discuss the details. Will you come with me? Isabel knew she should refuse. She knew that getting professionally involved with Cale Montbray was a terrible idea, but curiosity was stronger than prudence. All right, I'll go to the meeting, but I'm not promising anything. The next day she put on her most formal outfit, a black blazer her Aunt Rose had given her and a pair of dress pants, and accompanied Margaret to the business district of New York City, where the Montbray Corporation headquarters was located. The building was imposing, all glass and steel, occupying an entire block on Park Avenue. When they entered the lobby, Isabel felt even more out of place. Everything was modern, expensive, intimidating. The employees walking by were impeccably dressed and moved with urgency, talking on their cell phones in English. They were taken to the top floor where the executive offices were. Cale's secretary, an elegant woman in her 40s, greeted them with a professional smile. Mr. Montbray will see you in a few minutes. Can I offer you coffee, water, anything? They waited in a luxurious anteroom. Isabel was observing the paintings on the wall, original works of art that cost more than she earned in a decade, when the door to the main office opened. "You can come in, please." Cale's office was even more impressive than the anteroom. Huge windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the decor elegantly mixed modern with classic. He stood behind a massive dark wood desk, wearing a grey suit that made him seem even taller and more imposing. "Margaret, Isabel, thank you for coming." He greeted them formally, but when he took Isabel's hand, she felt the same electric shock as the first time. He held it for a few seconds longer than was appropriate. "Please, have a seat." The meeting proceeded professionally. Cale presented the project in detail. He had studied every aspect of the NGO's work, knew exactly where the deficiencies were and how they could be corrected. It was impressive how deeply he had delved into the subject in just 3 weeks. The shelter would be on the Upper West Side in a quiet residential area. We would have 24-hour security, psychologists specializing in trauma, social workers, lawyers. We would also invest heavily in vocational training, partnerships with companies to ensure the women have real job opportunities when they leave, he explained, showing blueprints and spreadsheets. It's incredible, Isabel admitted, genuinely impressed. "And you would be the general coordinator, starting salary of $15,000 a month, with the possibility of an increase based on results. You would have full autonomy to assemble the team and establish the protocols." It was 3 times more than she earned at the NGO. Margaret discreetly kicked her under the table. Can I think about it?" Isabel asked. "Of course, but I need an answer by Friday. The project needs to be approved by the board by the end of the month." When they left the building, Margaret could barely contain her excitement. "Izzy, you have to accept it's the chance of a lifetime, and for the lives of hundreds of women we'll be able to help." But Isabel was confused. Throughout the meeting, she had felt Cale's gaze on her. It wasn't just professional, there was something more there, something that made her nervous and excited at the same time. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood on her apartment balcony, drinking tea and thinking. It was a unique opportunity to make a real difference, but it also meant working directly with a man who affected her in a way she couldn't understand. On Thursday night, she finally made a decision. On Friday morning, Isabel arrived at the Montbray Corporation office an hour before the scheduled time. She hadn't been able to sleep well and decided it would be better to resolve the situation quickly. Cale's secretary informed her that he was on a conference call, but would see her in a few minutes. While she waited in the anteroom, she watched the office's activity through the glass walls. It was impressive how everything functioned like a well-oiled machine. Employees moved with purpose. Meetings took place simultaneously in various rooms. Phones rang constantly. It was a world completely different from hers, where urgencies were cries for help and tears of despair. "Isabel," the deep voice made her turn. Cale was at the door of the main office, sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, tie loosened. He looked like he had been working all night. "Come in." She followed him to the desk where 2 cups of steaming coffee were already waiting. "I thought you might want some coffee before we talk," he said, indicating one of the chairs. "Thank you." She sat down and took the cup, trying to control her nervousness. "So? What's your decision?" Isabel took a deep breath. "I accept, but I have some conditions." A shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "I'm listening." "First, I have full autonomy to hire the team, without interference from you or the company. Second, the care protocols will be established by me based on my field experience. Third, you do not interfere in the day-to-day operations of the shelter. You receive monthly reports, but you don't get to meddle in how I do my job. Anything else? Yes. Our relationship will be strictly professional. No dinners, no gifts, no personal conversations. You are my funder. I am your employee. That's it." Cale leaned back in his chair, watching her with that intensity that made her nervous. "And why is that last condition important to you?" "Because mixing personal with professional never works out. And because—" She hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Because there's something between us that shouldn't exist." "Something like what?" Isabel felt her cheeks flush. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Cale leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Say it anyway. I'm not going to play this game, Cale. I accept the job because the project is too important to let my personal life get in the way. But those are the rules. He was silent for a few seconds, studying her face. All right, I accept your conditions. But let me make one thing clear. I don't usually mix business with other things, so you can rest easy. There was something in his tone that irritated her, as if she were presumptuous for imagining he could be interested in her. Great. When can I start? Monday. First, we'll go to the site where the shelter will be built. Then you'll meet the team that will handle the construction. For the next 2 months, Isabel dove headfirst into the project. The property was perfect, an old mansion on the Upper West Side that would be renovated and adapted. It had a large garden, was on a quiet street, and offered enough privacy for the women to feel safe. Working with Cale's team was a revelation. They had resources she had never dreamed of, highly qualified professionals, state-of-the-art technology. For the first time, she felt she could truly make the difference she had always dreamed of. Cale kept his word and maintained his distance. He received the reports by email, approved the budgets without question, and only appeared at the construction site when there was an important decision to be made. But whenever they met, Isabel felt the same electric tension as their first encounter. She was too professional to show it, but she couldn't stop her heart from racing when she heard his voice in the hallway or when he entered a meeting. He had a way of occupying a space that mesmerized her. He was intelligent, decisive, knew exactly what he wanted. And there were moments when she would catch him looking at her in a way that made something warm stir deep in her stomach. By October, the shelter was almost ready. Only the final adjustments and team hiring remained. Isabel was at the site, checking the installation of the security systems when Cale showed up. "How's it looking?" he asked, walking through the main hall. "Better than I imagined. It's going to be perfect." They did a complete tour. Isabel spoke with enthusiasm about every detail. The therapy rooms with soundproofing, the kids' space for the children, the library, the vocational training workshops. Cale watched her speak, and there was something different in his eyes. "You seem happy," he said when they finished. "I am happy. This is the most important project of my life." They were standing in the garden, under the shade of the trees they had decided to preserve. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating golden patterns on the ground. "Can I ask you a personal question?" he said suddenly. Isabel raised her eyebrows. "I thought we agreed our relationship would be strictly professional." "It's about the work, sort of." "Go on. Why have you never married? A woman like you. A woman like me, what?" "Intelligent, dedicated, beautiful. You must have a lot of men interested in you." Isabel felt her heart race but kept her expression neutral. "I've never found anyone worth the trouble." "What kind of man would be worth it for you?" She stared at him, trying to understand where he was going with this. "Why do you want to know?" "Curiosity. Someone who respects me, who understands that I don't need to be saved or protected, who sees me as a partner, not a prize to be won." "And you've never found anyone like that?" "Never." She paused, then decided to return the question. "And you? Why don't you have a family?" His expression changed. It became more closed, darker. "I did. It didn't work out." "Married?" "No, but I had someone important, a long time ago." "What happened?" Cale was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I destroyed her," he said finally. There was such a deep pain in his voice that Isabel felt the urge to touch him, to comfort him, but she held back. "Everyone makes mistakes. Some mistakes are unforgivable." He turned to her. "Shall we go? It's getting late." During the ride back, Isabel couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. There was something in Cale's past that tormented him, something that explained his coldness, his excessive control over everything around him. That weekend, she went to visit her Aunt Rose as she always did. The 60-year-old woman lived in a simple house in Queens, where Isabel had grown up after her mother's death. "You're different, girl," Rose said as they prepared Sunday lunch. "Different how?" "I don't know. More agitated. Is something going on?" Isabel told her about the project, about Cale, about the confusion she felt. Rose listened in silence, stirring the sauté. "This man gets to you," she said finally. "He does. But I can't let him. It's too complicated." "Why?" "We're from completely different worlds. He has power, money, sophistication. I'm a girl from the country who works in social services." "So what? You think that matters when it comes to feelings?" "It does matter, especially when the feeling is only on one side." Rose dropped the spoon and turned to her niece. "Isabel, you've spent your whole life hiding behind all this independence. You're afraid to let yourself go because you're afraid of suffering like your mother did. It's not fear, it's prudence." "It is fear, and it's time for you to face it. Life isn't just about work and responsibility. Sometimes it's worth taking the risk." "And what if it goes wrong? And what if it goes right?" On Monday, Isabel arrived at the office determined to keep a cool head and focus only on work. The shelter was set to open in 2 weeks, and there were 1,000 details to sort out. She was reviewing the employment contracts for the staff when Cale's secretary appeared in her office. "Isabel, Mr. Montbray would like to speak with you." She went up to the executive suite with a tight feeling in her chest. Had she done something wrong? The project was running perfectly, on schedule and within budget. When she entered the office, Cale was standing with his back to her, looking out the window. "You wanted to see me?" He turned around. He had a serious expression she couldn't decipher. "Yes, please, sit down." She sat, tense. "Did something happen?" "You could say that." He approached the desk, rested his hands on it, and leaned forward. "We received a complaint." Isabel's blood ran cold. "A complaint? About what?" "Alleged irregularities at the Women in Motion NGO. Embezzlement of funds, over-invoicing on contracts. The DA's office is investigating." "That's impossible. Margaret would never do something like that." Perhaps Margaret didn't know, but it seems the organization's accountant was moving funds improperly for over 2 years. Isabel stood up, agitated. "And what does that have to do with me? You were the field coordinator. You signed reports, approved expenses. Your name is on several documents." "I signed what Margaret asked me to sign. I never had access to the financial matters." Cale watched her with that neutral expression she hated. "I know, but the DA's office doesn't. And now you're working on a project of ours. If there's any suspicion about your conduct..." "You think I stole money?" "No. I think you were used by unscrupulous people." "Then what's the problem?" Cale sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The problem is that our company cannot afford to be associated with a scandal. Our shareholders, our partners, they all expect us to maintain irreproachable ethical standards." Isabel understood where he was going and felt a cold anger rising from her stomach. "You're firing me. I'm placing you on temporary leave until the situation is resolved. The shelter is set to open in 2 weeks. I assembled the entire team, established all the protocols. And all of that will be maintained, just under new coordination." "Whose?" "Anne Beatrice Silva, a psychologist, specialist in domestic violence. She has worked with us on other projects." Isabel knew Anne Beatrice by name. She was competent, had an impeccable resume, and she was also beautiful, elegant, from the same social world as Cale. "I see," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Isabel." "No, you don't need to explain anything. I understand perfectly." She headed for the door. "When the situation is resolved, you'll call me, if it ever gets resolved." "It will be resolved, and I will call you." She stopped with her hand on the doorknob and turned around. "Don't bother. I've just understood something very important about you." "What?" "You're exactly the kind of man I always knew you were. Rich, powerful, and a coward. At the first sign of trouble, you abandoned the people who worked for you. You're being unfair." "Unfair?" "I dedicated the last 3 months of my life to this project. I worked 16 hours a day to create something perfect, and you discard me like trash at the first complication." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that. And you know what's worse? For a few moments I almost believed you were different." She left, slamming the door, leaving Cale alone in the office. In the following days, Isabel found herself in the center of a storm. The DA's investigation made the news, and her name appeared in some reports as a former employee of the NGO under investigation. It was humiliating and terrifying at the same time. Margaret was arrested and held without bail. The accountant disappeared, and Isabel had to hire a lawyer with the money she had managed to save while working on Cale's project. The worst part was having nothing to do. All doors in the non-profit sector closed to her. No one wanted to hire someone involved in a scandal, even if indirectly. She stayed at home watching her life fall apart without being able to do anything. Carla tried to cheer her up, but it was hard to stay optimistic. "It will pass, Izzy. The truth always comes out." "And what if it doesn't? What if I can never work in this field again?" "You will. You're too good at what you do to be sidelined forever." 2 weeks after her conversation with Cale, Isabel was at the bakery near her house when she saw the headline in the newspaper. "New shelter for women victims of violence inaugurated in New York City." The photo showed Cale cutting a red ribbon next to an elegant blonde woman, Anne Beatrice. Isabel bought the paper and read the entire article. It talked about the $5 million investment, the modern facilities, the innovative care protocols. Protocols she had created. She felt a mixture of pride and bitterness. The project was perfect, exactly as she had dreamed. But she couldn't enjoy the result of her own work. That night, she cried for the first time since it all began. She cried out of anger, frustration, disappointment, but mostly she cried because deep down she still felt something for Cale. And that made her feel even more foolish. A month later, she received a call from her lawyer. "Isabel, I have good news. The accountant was found in Mexico and confessed everything. You've been formally cleared of all charges, and there's more. The investigation revealed that you were the only employee at the NGO who never benefited from the embezzlement. In fact, you even questioned some expenses via email." It was what she had been waiting to hear for 2 months, but strangely, she didn't feel relief. She just felt an immense emptiness. "And now?" she asked. "Now you can start over. Your name has been publicly cleared. In fact, I've already received 3 calls from organizations interested in hiring you." But Isabel didn't just want to start over. She wanted satisfaction. She wanted to look Cale in the eye and hear an apology. She wanted him to admit he had been unfair to her. The next day, she dressed carefully and went to the Montbray Corporation office. She didn't make an appointment. She just showed up. The secretary was surprised to see her. "Isabel, how have you been? We heard the good news." "Thank you. Is Mr. Montbray in?" "He is, but he has a meeting in a few minutes." "This won't take long." She knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. Cale was on the phone speaking in English. When he saw her, he cut the conversation short. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone and hung up. "Isabel." She approached the desk, placing a copy of the exoneration document on the dark wood. "I came to bring you this, in case you wanted to check it before offering me my job back." Cale took the document, read it quickly. "I knew you were innocent." "You knew?" "From the first day. I had my own people investigate. Within 48 hours, I was sure you had nothing to do with the embezzlement." Isabel was speechless for a few seconds. "And you still fired me?" "I put you on leave, temporarily." "Why? If you knew I was innocent, why did you remove me?" Cale stood up, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of her. There was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of you." Isabel frowned. "Of me? Why?" "Because you make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again." Her heart hammered, but she tried to maintain her composure. "What kind of things? Do you really want me to say?" She nodded, not trusting her own voice. Cale took a step closer. Now there were only a few inches between them. The urge to protect, the urge to care, the urge to... He paused, running a hand through his hair. "The urge to kiss you until you forget your own name." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Isabel could feel the heat of his body. the scent of his cologne, the intensity of his dark gaze. "And why does that scare you so much?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "Because the last time I allowed myself to feel this for someone, I ended up destroying a life." "That was a long time ago. You're not the same person. How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I see how you treat your employees, how you care about the social projects, how—" She hesitated. "How you look at me." Cale raised his hand and lightly touched her face. Isabel felt her entire body tingle. "You have no idea what you do to me," he murmured. "Then tell me." For a moment it seemed like he was going to kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips, and Isabel felt she would forget how to breathe if he didn't close the distance soon. But then he stepped back. "I can't. It's too complicated." The disappointment was like a punch to the gut. "Why is it complicated? We're two free adults. You don't understand. There's something about me you don't know, something that would completely change how you feel." "Then tell me." Cale moved back behind the desk as if he needed the physical barrier between them. "I can't. At least not now." Isabel took a deep breath, trying to control her frustration. "All right. I understand you have your reasons, but I have a proposal for you." "I'm listening." "Give me my position at the shelter back. We forget this conversation and go back to having a strictly professional relationship. And when you feel ready to tell me these terrible secrets that haunt you so much, you can find me." Cale was silent for a few seconds. "And what if I never feel ready?" "Then at least I'll know I tried." He watched her for a long moment, as if he were fighting an internal battle. "Your job is waiting for you. You can start on Monday." Isabel nodded and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned. "Cale?" "Yes?" "The next time you decide to protect me from something, consult me first. I may look fragile, but I know how to take care of myself." She left, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the certainty that things between them would never be the same again. Returning to the shelter was like breathing again. Isabel had spent 2 months feeling useless, and now she was back in the place where she knew she could make a difference. Anne Beatrice had done a good job keeping things running, but it was obvious something was missing. The women being served seemed more distant, less connected with the staff. "They were asking about you," said Fernanda, one of the psychologists, on her first day back. "Mrs. Shaw even cried when she heard you had been put on leave." Constance Shaw was a 45-year-old woman who had arrived at the shelter 3 months earlier, after 15 years of a violent marriage. She had 2 teenage sons and was trying to rebuild her life from scratch. Isabel had personally overseen her case from the beginning. "How is she?" she asked, flipping through the file. "Better. She got the job at the clothing store you recommended. The boys are adjusting to the new school, but she always asks about you." Isabel smiled. It was for cases like Constance's that all the effort was worthwhile. The following days were intense. There was a lot to catch up on, new cases to evaluate, protocols to adjust. It was exactly the distraction she needed to not think about her conversation with Cale. But it was hard to forget him completely, especially because he would show up at the shelter without warning, always with some professional excuse. He wanted to know about the service rates, the effectiveness of the programs, the budget. But Isabel noticed that his eyes followed her as she walked through the halls or talked with the women. It was a strange dance they both performed. Professional on the surface, but with a constant electric tension underneath. Every time they met, the air seemed to grow thicker. 2 weeks. After returning to work, Isabel was in the shelter's garden with a group of children when Cale appeared. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she was there because one of the mothers had needed to go to a job interview and had no one to leave her son with. "Aunt Izzy, look what I drew," said Michael, a 6-year-old boy who had arrived with his mother a week ago. Isabel knelt to see the drawing. It was a colorful house with several people in front, all smiling. "How beautiful, Michael. Who are these people?" "It's my new family. You, my Mom, Aunt Fernanda, Aunt Carla from the kitchen." He pointed to each figure. "And this here is the man who pays for us to live here." Isabel followed the boy's finger. The figure was noticeably taller than the others, wore a suit, and had dark hair. "Why did you draw him?" "Because my mom said he's a good man who helps moms who got hit by mean dads." Isabel felt something tighten in her chest. It was interesting how children saw things so simply. "He's here," Michael said suddenly, pointing to the garden entrance. Isabel turned and saw Cale standing at the entrance watching the scene. He was dressed casually, dark jeans and a white shirt, which made him look less intimidating than usual. "Mr. Cale!" shouted Michael, running towards him. "Look at my drawing!" Cale crouched down to the boy's level and examined the paper seriously. "It's very nice. You have an artist's talent. Aunt Izzy said I can hang it on the fridge of our new house when Mommy gets a job. I'm sure your mum will be very proud." Isabel approached, trying to ignore how her heart raced whenever she saw Cale interacting with the children. There was a natural kindness in him that contrasted with his business-like coldness. "I didn't know you came on Saturdays," she said. "I was passing through the neighborhood and decided to check in." He stood up, putting his hands in his pockets. "Do you always work on weekends?" When necessary, Michael's mother had an important job interview. "And did it go well?" "I don't know yet. She should be back any moment." As if summoned, Sonia appeared in the garden. She was a 30-year-old woman, too thin, with deep dark circles under her eyes but a smile on her face. "I got it," she said, almost shouting. "I got the job!" Michael ran to hug his mother, and Isabel felt her eyes welling up with tears. It was always emotional to see a woman succeed in getting back on her feet. "Congratulations, Sonia," she said, hugging them both. "When do you start?" "Monday, and they're going to help me find a daycare for Michael near work." Isabel introduced Cale, explaining that he was responsible for funding the shelter. Sonia was visibly moved. "Thank you so much, sir. You saved our lives." Cale seemed uncomfortable with the thanks. "The staff here saved you. I just pay the bills." But Sonia insisted on telling her story, how she had suffered violence for years, how she was afraid to report her husband, how she arrived at the shelter with her son and only the clothes on her back. "Now I have hope again. Michael will be able to grow up in peace without seeing his father hit his mother." After Sonia and her son left, Cale was silent for a few minutes, looking at the empty garden. "It must be gratifying," he said finally. "It is. Even on the difficult days, cases like hers make it all worthwhile. How many women like her have you helped?" "Hundreds, each with a different story, but all with something in common, the courage to start over." Cale watched her with a strange expression. "Do you believe people can really change? Leave the past behind?" There was something in the question that seemed very personal. "I do, but it's a difficult process. It requires the person to want to change and be willing to face their pain." "And what if the past is too heavy? If the mistakes are unforgivable?" Isabel moved closer to him, trying to read what was behind his dark eyes. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Cale, especially those who acknowledge their own mistakes." They stared at each other in silence. There was a vulnerability in his gaze that she rarely saw. "Do you want to tell me what mistake it was that torments you so much?" she asked softly. For a moment it seemed like he was going to speak. He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his hair. "Not here," he said finally. "Then where? Would you have dinner with me, tonight?" Her heart leaped. "I thought we agreed to keep things professional." "I thought so too, but I can't seem to do it." The honesty in his voice completely disarmed her. "Cale, one dinner, just to talk. You said that when I was ready to tell you my secrets, I should find you. I'm finding you." Isabel knew she was about to cross a line from which she might not be able to return, but curiosity, and something stronger that she preferred not to name, won over prudence. "All right, but somewhere private. I don't want our personal lives to interfere with work. Do you know the restaurant La Casserole?" It was a small, discreet and elegant French restaurant in Soho. "I do." "At 8? "At 8. When Cale left, Isabel stayed in the garden, trying to understand what had just happened. She was about to have dinner with the man who left her completely confused, who affected her in a way she couldn't explain. A man who carried secrets he seemed afraid to tell. She got home and called Carla, who was spending the weekend at her mother's house. "You're going to dinner with him? Seriously?" "I am. He said he wants to tell me about his past." "Izzy, are you sure you're prepared to hear it?" "No, but I need to know. I can't keep pretending I don't feel anything for him." "And what exactly do you feel?" Isabel fell silent, trying to find the right words. Attraction, curiosity, and something deeper that I'd rather not analyze right now. "Be careful, my friend. Men like him are complicated. All men are complicated. At least he's honest about it." She spent the rest of the afternoon choosing what to wear. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard, but she also didn't want to look sloppy. She opted for a simple black dress, flat shoes, and discreet makeup. She arrived at the restaurant promptly at 8. Cale was already there at a table in the back of the room, away from the other customers. He looked handsome in a way that made her stomach turn. A dark blue shirt, no tie, his hair slightly messy as if he had run his hands through it several times. "You look beautiful," he said as she sat down. "Thank you." She accepted the glass of wine he offered. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Cale took a generous sip of wine before answering. "About why I am the way I am. About why I'm afraid to get involved with someone like you." "Someone like me. Good. Pure. Someone who believes in people." Isabel frowned. "You don't know me well enough to judge me as pure." "I know enough." He leaned forward. "Have you never done anything you deeply regretted? Never hurt someone you loved?" "Of course I have. Everyone has." "Not the way I did." The waiter interrupted to take their orders. When they were alone again, Cale took a deep breath. "I had a sister," he began. "Cecilia, 3 years younger than me. She was—" he smiled sadly. "She was everything good in the world. Kind, cheerful, trusting. She believed in everyone, saw the best in people." Isabel remained silent, sensing she was about to hear something very painful. "My father built the company from scratch. He was a strict, controlling man, but fair. When I was 25, he made me vice president. Cecilia was 22 and finishing her business degree. The plan was for her to join the company too." He paused, fidgeting with his wine glass. "I was arrogant back then. I thought I knew everything, that I could control everything. And there was one of the company's partners, Robert Atkins, who always bothered me. He was older, smart, charming. My father trusted him, but I always felt something was wrong." "What happened?" "Robert became interested in Cecilia, and she in him. It was obvious he only wanted to get close to her to have more influence in the company, but she didn't see that. She was in love." Cale's expression grew darker. "I tried to warn her. I told her Robert was no good, that he was just using her, but Cecilia thought I was being possessive, jealous. We had a huge fight. She moved out and went to live with him. And then? Then I did the worst thing of my life. I decided to prove to her that Robert was a scoundrel." Isabel felt a chill. "What did you do?" "I set up a situation to catch him cheating on her. I hired a woman to seduce him, chose a place where I knew Cecilia would see them. I thought she would break up with him and come back home." The silence that followed was heavy. "Did she see?" Cale nodded, unable to look her in the eye. She saw, but instead of just being hurt, she fell into a deep depression. She found out she was pregnant with his child, had to have an abortion because he wouldn't take responsibility. She started taking anxiety medication, stopped studying, stopped going out. "And you? I thought I had done the right thing, that she would recover and thank me for opening her eyes." His voice grew quieter. "But she didn't recover. She got worse and worse. She stopped eating, sleeping. My parents tried to help, took her to several doctors, but nothing worked." Isabel already imagined where the story was heading, and her heart ached. One night she overdosed on sleeping pills. She left a letter saying she couldn't live anymore, knowing she would never be able to trust anyone again. The tears in Cale's eyes were genuine. "She died because of me, because I wanted to prove I was right, because I couldn't accept that she was happy, even if it was with a man I despised. Isabel reached out and touched his hand on the table. Cale, you didn't kill your sister. She made a choice. She made a choice because I destroyed her ability to trust, to love, to believe in people. He looked at her. My father died 2 years later, of a broken heart. Before he died, he made me promise that I would never hurt someone innocent again, that I would never get involved with a woman too good for the world I live in. Now Isabel understood. That's why you're afraid of me. I'm afraid of repeating the same mistake, of destroying someone who doesn't deserve to be destroyed. But I'm not your sister, Cale. I'm stronger than you think. That's what I hope. But what if you're not? They were silent as the food arrived, but neither of them had much of an appetite. Can I ask a question? Isabel said finally. Of course. Do you regret exposing Robert? Cale thought for a few seconds. I regret the way I did it, the cruel, calculated way. But I don't regret protecting my sister from him. The problem is that her protection became more important than her happiness. And what did you learn from that? That sometimes it's better to let people make their own mistakes than to try to save them from themselves. Isabel nodded slowly. That's a hard lesson. The hardest of my life. They finished dinner talking about other things, work, travel, books. It was amazing how much they had in common when they weren't confined to their professional roles. When they left the restaurant, Cale walked her to her car. Thank you for listening, he said. Thank you for trusting me. He moved closer, raised his hand, and lightly touched her face. Isabel, I really wish I could be the man you deserve. Who says you can't be? 10 years of guilt and self-sabotage. 10 years is enough time to learn from your mistakes. They looked at each other in silence, and Isabel felt that if he didn't kiss her in that moment, she would implode. But he just kissed her forehead and stepped away. Good night, Izzy. Good night. On the way home, Isabel tried to process everything she had heard. She understood Cale better now, his defenses, his fears, but she also felt something stronger for him. Compassion, yes, but also an almost desperate desire to show him that not all endings had to be tragic. What she didn't know was that Cale was going through the same internal struggle. For the first time in 10 years, he wanted to take a risk. He wanted to believe it could be different, that he could love someone without destroying them. But fear was still greater than desire. For now. In the 2 weeks following the dinner, something changed between Isabel and Cale. It was no longer the unspoken tension of before. Now there was a new intimacy, a mutual understanding that made every encounter more intense. He started showing up at the shelter more frequently, always with some professional justification, but staying longer than necessary. He would watch Isabel work, talk to the women, play with the children. And whenever their eyes met, there was a silent promise in the air. Isabel found herself looking forward to these visits. She would choose her clothes, wondering if he would show up, and spend more time in the main hall to increase the chances of running into him. It was a dangerous game they both played, getting closer and closer to a line they knew they could no longer ignore. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in July. Isabel was organizing documents in her office when she heard screams coming from the main hall. She ran to see what was happening and found Constance in a panic, holding her phone with trembling hands. "He found out where I am," she was shouting at Fernanda. "He said he's coming to get me, that he's going to kill me." Isabel approached quickly. "Constance, calm down. Tell me what happened." "My ex-husband, he just called. He said he knows where I work, where I live, where the boys go to school, that if I don't come home by tomorrow, he's going to—" The woman couldn't finish the sentence, collapsing into sobs. Isabel hugged Constance, signaling for Fernanda to call security. It was the nightmare of any woman in a violent situation, to be found by her abuser. "We're going to call the police," she said, trying to sound calm. "What's the use? He's never been arrested before. He won't be now. And when I get out of the station, he'll be waiting for me." Isabel knew Constance was right. The system for protecting victims of domestic violence was still flawed. Restraining orders were constantly violated. "He won't find you here," she said firmly. "We have 24-hour security." But even so, she requested reinforcements for the security team and instructed that no information about the shelter's residents be given to strangers. It was as she was leaving the police station after filing the report that she received a call from Cale. "I heard what happened," he said without preamble. "How's the situation?" "Under control for now, but I'm worried. Her ex-husband is violent and has connections in the police force. I don't know if we can protect her adequately." "Where are you now?" "Leaving the precinct. I'll be waiting for you at the shelter." When Isabel arrived, she found Cale talking seriously with John, the head of security. There were 2 black cars parked in front of the building that she didn't recognize. "What's going on?" she asked. "Security reinforcement," Cale replied. "These men are from a specialized firm. They'll stay here until the situation is resolved." "Cale, this must cost a fortune." "So what? Her life is worth more than money." Isabel felt something tighten in her chest. She saw powerful men buy security for themselves all the time, but she had never seen someone do it for a complete stranger. "Thank you," she said simply. They entered the shelter together. Constance was in the TV, a room with other residents visibly calmer. The children were playing normally, oblivious to the adults' tension. "Mrs. Shaw," Cale said, approaching her. "May I speak with you?" The woman stood up, nervous. She was still intimidated by him. "I want you to know that you are safe here. I've placed extra security and they will remain for as long as necessary." "Why are you doing this for me?" Constance asked, her eyes welling up. Cale glanced quickly at Isabel before answering, "Because everyone deserves to feel safe, and because the people who work here care about you, so I care, too." That night, after all the residents had gone to their rooms, Isabel and Cale stayed in the kitchenette, drinking coffee and discussing the next steps. "The detective said it could take a few days to get a warrant for his arrest," she explained. "And what if she wants to leave before then? I'll try to convince her to stay, at least until he's arrested." Cale nodded, stirring his coffee distractedly. "Does this remind you of anything?" Isabel asked softly. "You mean, does it make me think of my sister?" "Yes." He was silent for a few seconds. "Yes, but this time I'm on the right side." "You were always on the right side, Cale. The problem was the method, not the intention." He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me believe I'm not a monster." Isabel got up and sat in the chair next to him. "Because you're not. A monster wouldn't spend the night at a shelter to make sure a woman is safe. A monster wouldn't spend a fortune hiring security for someone he barely knows. Maybe I'm just trying to compensate. Or maybe you're simply a good man who made a terrible mistake and has spent 10 years punishing himself for it." They looked at each other in silence. The kitchenette was lit only by the soft light over the sink, and there was something intimate about the moment, the 2 of them alone, talking about important things while the rest of the world slept. "Isabel," he said, his voice hoarse. "Yes." "I'm tired of running." "Then stop running." Cale reached out and touched her face. Isabel closed her eyes, surrendering to his touch. "If I kiss you now, there's no going back," he murmured. "Who said I want to go back?" He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Isabel didn't want to pull away. She had wanted this for weeks, since that first glance at the hotel in Miami. When his lips touched hers, it was as if everything that had been contained between them finally exploded. The kiss started softly, almost hesitantly, but soon became more urgent. Isabel felt his hands in her hair, the taste of coffee on his lips, the masculine scent that had already become familiar. When they broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, but without sounding regretful. "Why not?" "Because now it will be impossible to pretend I don't feel anything for you." "And what do you feel?" Cale pulled her closer, so she was sitting between his legs. "Things I haven't felt in 10 years, things I swore I'd never feel again." "Like what?" "The urge to protect, the urge to care, the urge to—" He paused, kissing her neck lightly. "The urge for you." Isabel felt her entire body tingle. "Cale, I know it's complicated, I know I'm complicated, but I can't pretend you're just my employee anymore. And I can't pretend you're just my boss anymore." They kissed again, and this time Isabel felt all her defenses crumble. It was dangerous, reckless, but it was also inevitable. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them separate quickly. It was John, the head of security, making his rounds. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, trying to hide a smile. "Just wanted to let you know everything's quiet. The guys from the security firm are in position." "Thank you, John," Cale replied, trying to regain his composure. When they were alone again, the intimate mood had dissipated. Reality returned. They were at her workplace in a delicate situation. "I have to go," Cale said, getting up. "Cale." "No. If I stay another minute, I'll do something we'll both regret." He came closer, quickly kissing her forehead. "Sleep well." Isabel was left alone in the kitchenette, touching her lips and trying to understand what had just happened. She was sure she had crossed a line from which she could never return. In the following days, Constance's situation was resolved. Her ex-husband was arrested trying to break into her workplace, and they finally obtained an effective restraining order. But the resolution of the case brought a new complication. There was no longer any justification for Cale to show up at the shelter every day, which didn't stop him from continuing to show up. "I came to check if the new security systems are working properly," he would say, or "I need to discuss the budget for the next quarter," or "I'd like an update on the effectiveness indicators." They were all transparent excuses, and both of them knew it. But they continued the game. It was Friday night, and Isabel was finishing up some reports when she realized she was alone at the shelter. The night shift had already arrived, and she could go home. She was grabbing her bag when she heard footsteps at the reception. "Still here?" said the deep voice she knew so well. "Cale, I thought you weren't coming today. I needed to talk to you." There was something different in his tone, more decisive. "About what?" "About us." Isabel felt her heart race. "I don't know if this is the best place." "Then let's go somewhere else." It was a statement, not a question. "Where?" "My house. I need to show you something." Isabel knew that if she went to his house, there would be no going back. She also knew she didn't want to go back. "All right." Cale's house was in Scarsdale, on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was modern but not ostentatious. Clean lines, lots of glass and wood, a well-kept garden. Inside, it was elegant and masculine, with designer furniture and carefully chosen works of art. "It's beautiful," Isabel said, looking around the living room. "Want something to drink?" "Wine?" He poured 2 glasses and led her to an office on the second floor. That was where he wanted to show her something. The walls were covered with photos. Isabel moved closer to see them better and realized they were all of the same person, a beautiful young woman with brown hair and a radiant smile. "Cecilia," Cale said from behind her. She was very beautiful. And very good, genuine goodness, you know. There wasn't a malicious bone in her body. Isabel studied the photos. She saw Cecilia as a child, a teenager at her graduation, always smiling. In the last photo, she was hugging Cale at some party. They both looked happy. That was taken 2 weeks. "Before she started dating Robert," he said, coming closer. "Why do you keep all these photos here?" "To remind me, to never forget what pride can do." Isabel turned to look at him. "Do you think she would want to know that you stopped living because of her?" "I didn't stop living, I just became more careful." "Careful or afraid?" Cale didn't answer. He walked over to a desk where there were some personal items, a small teddy bear, a bracelet, a book of poems. These were her favorite things. "My father gave them to me after the funeral." Isabel picked up the book of poems. It was an old edition of E. Cummings. She liked poetry. She loved it. Always said she wanted to find a love like in the poems. And she did, just with the wrong person. Exactly. And I destroyed that possibility for her. Isabel closed the book and put it back on the desk. "Cale, can I ask you a difficult question?" "Of course. Are you showing me all this so I'll understand why we can't be together?" He was silent for a few seconds. "I'm showing you so you'll understand who I really am, so you can make a conscious choice." And what choice is that? Whether you want to risk getting involved with someone who might hurt you. Isabel moved closer to him, placing her hands on his face. Cale, look at me. He obeyed, and she saw all the vulnerability he tried to hide. I'm not your sister. I'm not a naive girl who needs to be protected from the world. I'm a grown woman who knows exactly what she wants. And what do you want? You. The word hung in the air between them. Cale pulled her closer, so there was no space left between their bodies. Are you sure? Absolutely. He kissed her with an urgency that hadn't been there before. It was as if all the barriers he had built around his heart were finally collapsing. Isabel responded with the same intensity, tangling her fingers in his hair, feeling the tense muscles of his back under his shirt. When they broke apart for air, he rested his forehead against hers. If we get together, you'll have to put up with my ghosts, he murmured. And you'll have to put up with my past and my quirks. What quirks? I wake up too early on weekends. I leave dishes in the sink and I'm stubborn. He smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. I think I can live with that. And I think I can live with your ghosts. They kissed again, and this time Isabel knew there would be no going back. She also knew she didn't want there to be. Outside, the rain began to fall heavily, as if the entire city were washing away the past to make way for something new. The next 3 months were the happiest of Isabel's life, and also the most complicated. She and Cale tried to maintain absolute discretion about their relationship, but it was hard to ignore the chemistry between them. At the shelter, they maintained professional formality, but a lingering glance or a discreet smile was all it took for the tension to become palpable. Carla was the first to notice. You two are getting terrible at pretending, she said one Thursday, as they had lunch at the diner near the shelter. Pretending what? Isabel tried, but she knew it was useless. Izzy, yesterday I saw you two talking about productivity reports, and it looked like you were exchanging declarations of love. Isabel felt her cheeks flush. Is it that obvious? To someone who knows you, yes. You're different. More luminous. It was true. For the first time in years, Isabel felt complete. Cale was attentive without being suffocating, intelligent without being arrogant, protective without being controlling. And in bed, well, Isabel discovered a whole side of herself she never knew existed. They spent weekends at his house, cooking together, watching movies, talking late into the night. Cale told stories about his business, the places he had visited. She talked about her work, about the women she helped, about her dreams for the future. It was surprisingly easy to be with him. After so many years alone, Isabel had grown accustomed to her own company. But with Cale, the silence was comfortable, the conversations flowed naturally, and she found herself thinking about a future for two. The first sign of trouble came on a Monday in October. Isabel was in her office, reviewing the files of new residents, when Margaret appeared at the door. The former president of Women in Motion had been released from jail 2 weeks earlier, after it was proven that she too had been a victim of the accountant. Izzy, can I talk to you? Of course, Margaret, sit down. The woman seemed nervous, fidgeting with her worn leather bag. First, I want to apologize for everything you went through because of me. I know it was unfair. I've already forgotten it. The important thing is that the truth came out. Yes, but there's something you need to know about your boyfriend. Isabel felt her stomach sink. How do you know I'm dating someone? It's not hard to tell when you talk about him, and because a friend of mine works at the DA's office, she told me some things about the investigation that didn't make it to the press. What things? Margaret hesitated before continuing. The investigation into the NGO didn't start by chance. Someone made an anonymous tip. Someone who knew very specific details about our accounting. Isabel's heart began to beat faster. And my friend managed to find out where the tip came from. It was made by a law firm that provides services to the Montbray Corporation. Isabel's world stopped. Are you implying that I'm saying that Cale Montbray was the one who reported the NGO? And what's more, he knew you would be investigated too. It was all calculated. Isabel remained silent, trying to process the information. But why would he do that? I don't know. Maybe to get you out of there and bring you to his project, maybe for other reasons. But the fact is, he knew your professional life would be destroyed. After Margaret left, Isabel sat alone in her office trying to understand. If it was true, it meant Cale had orchestrated the entire situation. Her removal from the NGO, her exoneration, her hiring for the new project, it would have all been planned. But why? And why hadn't he told her the truth? That night he showed up at her apartment as he usually did on Mondays. He brought Chinese food and a bottle of wine, smiling when he saw her. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing her on the cheek. "Interesting," she replied, watching his reaction. "Margaret visited me." Cale became imperceptibly more tense. "Oh, really? How is she?" "Fine. She wanted to tell me some things about the investigation." They sat down to dinner, but Isabel barely touched her food. "Cale, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "How did you find out about the NGO's financial problems?" He chewed slowly before answering. "I read about the investigation in the papers, like everyone else." "No." "How did you know before the investigation began? Did you know there were irregularities?" The silence that followed was telling. "Isabel, you made the tip, didn't you?" Cale dropped his fork and stared at her. "Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true or not?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's true." Isabel felt as if she had been punched. "Why?" "Because I found out you were working for a corrupt organization and thought you deserved to know." "Liar. If you wanted to warn me, you would have spoken to me directly." "And would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to sabotage your boss to get you for my project?" Isabel stood up, agitated. "So you preferred to destroy my professional life to save me?" "I knew you would be cleared. I had it investigated first." "Had it investigated?" Her voice rose an octave. "You investigated my life without my knowledge." Isabel, calm down. "Calm down! You lied to me for months. Let me think it was a coincidence that you had been generous by offering me the job." "I was generous. You're the best professional I know in the field. But it wasn't about my work, was it? It was about your damn savior complex." Cale stood up too, trying to get closer. "That's not it. It's exactly that. You did the same thing you did with your sister. You decided you knew what was best for me and acted behind my back." The comparison to Cecilia hit him like a slap. "It's not the same thing." "It is. You manipulated my life to protect me from something I didn't even know existed. And what if I had done nothing? What if you had found out about the embezzlement after years of working there? Your reputation would have been destroyed forever. That was my choice to make. A poorly informed choice. At least it would have been my choice." They stared at each other in silence, both breathing heavily. "Isabel," he said, his voice lower, "I love you. I did all of this because I love you." It was the first time he had said those words, and under any other circumstances she would have melted. But at that moment she only felt anger. "You don't love me, you love the idea of saving me." "That's not true." "No? Then explain why you didn't tell me the truth from the beginning. Why did you let me believe a lie for months?" Cale had no answer for that. "I want you to leave," she said finally. "Isabel, leave, now. We can talk about this when you're calmer. I'm not going to get calmer. And we're not going to talk about this, it's over." "You're reacting impulsively." "I'm reacting because I found out the man I thought I loved is a liar and a manipulator." Cale grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned. "One day you'll understand that everything I did was to protect you. And one day you'll understand that protection without consent is a prison." He left, and Isabel leaned against the closed door, trying to control the tears that burned her eyes. In the following days, it was hard to maintain composure at work. Cale didn't show up at the shelter, but he sent formal emails about administrative matters. Isabel responded in kind, keeping the tone strictly professional. Inside, she was shattered. She missed him in a physical, painful way, but along with the longing came anger. How could he lie for so long? How could he let her believe their relationship had started naturally? Carla tried to console her. Maybe he really did it thinking of your best interests. Carla, he lied to me. For months. He let me go through a public humiliation, knowing he could have prevented it all if he had just told the truth. And if he had told you, would you have believed him? Isabel fell silent. It was a difficult question to answer. I don't know, but I would have deserved the chance to decide. A week after the fight, Isabel received an unexpected call. Hello? Isabel? It's Anne Beatrice from the Montbray Corporation. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about something important. They met at a cafe in Soho. Anne Beatrice was even more beautiful in person. Blonde, elegant, with the natural sophistication of women from New York's high society. Thank you for coming, she said after they sat down. What did you want to talk to me about? About Cale, and about you. Isabel frowned. I don't understand. I know you two broke up, and I know it was because of the investigation at the NGO. How do you know that? Because I've known Cale for a long time. We were engaged. Isabel felt her stomach drop. Engaged? 5 years ago. The relationship lasted 2 years, but it never really worked. He could never fully commit. And why are you telling me this? Anne Beatrice stirred her coffee before answering. Because in the last few weeks, I've seen a change in him that I'd never seen before. He was happy, genuinely. And now he's destroyed. If you're here to convince me to go back to him, I'm not. I'm here to tell you the truth about why he did what he did. Isabel leaned forward, interested despite herself. What truth? 6 months ago, Kyle accidentally discovered the problems at your NGO. One of the company's lawyers mentioned in a meeting that there were suspicions about some organizations receiving donations. Your NGO was on the list. And then? Then he became desperate. He knew that if the information was passed to the DA's office, you would be investigated along with all the other employees. He knew your reputation would be tarnished. So he made the tip to get ahead of the process? He made the tip because it was the only way to control how the investigation would be conducted. He knows people in the DA's office. He managed to ensure you would be treated as a witness, not a suspect. Isabel was silent, processing the information. But why didn't he tell me? Because he knows you. He knew you would never accept being protected in that way, that you would prefer to face the consequences alone. And he was right. He was, but he was also in love. And when we're in love, sometimes we do stupid things thinking they're noble. And Beatrice leaned forward. Isabel, I know he made a mistake. I know lying to you was wrong. But I also know that everything he did was out of love. And I know he's suffering just as much as you are. Why are you telling me this? You're nothing to each other anymore. Precisely. Because I have nothing to gain or lose. And because I believe you two deserve a second chance. That night, Isabel lay awake thinking about her conversation with Anne Beatrice. She understood Cale's motivations better now, but that didn't lessen the feeling of betrayal. He had made decisions about her life without consulting her. He had lied for months, but he had also saved her from a situation that could have been much worse. On Saturday morning, she decided to visit him. She needed some answers that only he could give. The house was quiet when she rang the doorbell. It took a few minutes for him to answer, and when he opened the door, Isabel was shocked. Cale was visibly haggard, unshaven, with deep dark circles under his eyes, wearing wrinkled clothes. Isabel, he said, surprised, what are you doing here? We need to talk. He let her in. The house was a mess, with Chinese food containers on the table and empty whiskey bottles on the kitchen counter. Are you okay? She asked, concerned despite everything. I'm great, as you can see. They sat in the living room. Cale seemed uncomfortable, as if he didn't know what to expect. Anne Beatrice came to see me, Isabel said. Ah, he sighed. What did she tell you? The truth. About why you made the tip. And does that change anything? Isabel was silent for a few seconds. It changes the context, but it doesn't change the fact that you lied to me. I know, and I regret it. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Because I knew you would never forgive me, and because Because I was afraid of losing you. And you ended up losing me anyway. I did. The silence that followed was heavy. Cale, she said finally, I need to know something. What? If there hadn't been an investigation, if you hadn't found out about the problems at the NGO, would you have approached me anyway? He looked her in, the eyes before answering. Yes. From the first moment we met at the hotel in Miami, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Then why did you create this whole elaborate situation? Why not just ask me to dinner? Because you rejected me when I offered you the job. You said you weren't interested in me. I lied. I was interested from the very first second. Cale closed his eyes, running a hand over his face. So we both screwed up big time. We did. They looked at each other for a long moment. And now? He asked. I don't know. I'm confused, hurt, angry, but also what? I also still love you. It was the first time she had said those words, and their impact was immediate. Cale leaned forward, as if he wanted to touch her, but held back. Isabel, but loving isn't enough. I need to trust you, and I don't know if I can. What do I need to do to win back your trust? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe time. She stood up to leave. I'm going to think about all this, but I need space. How much space? As much as it takes. When she reached the door, he spoke again. Isabel. Yes, I love you, and I will love you regardless of what you decide. I know. And that was what made everything even harder. A month passed in silence between them. Cale respected Isabel's request for space, limiting himself to necessary professional emails. She threw herself into her work with more intensity than ever, as if trying to drown her confused feelings in caring for the women at the shelter. It was Fernanda who first noticed that something was wrong with Isabel. You're losing weight, she said one Tuesday, as they had lunch in the kitchenette. And you have dark circles. I'm fine, Isabel lied. No, you're not. And you know why? Because you're running from your own feelings. I'm not running from anything. Yes, you are. That man loves you. You love him. But you're both suffering because of pride. It's not pride. It's about trust. Izzy, Fernanda placed a hand on her friend's arm. Trust can be rebuilt. A love like yours doesn't come around twice in a lifetime. That same afternoon, while Isabel was reviewing the files of new residents, she received a call that would change everything. Isabel, it's Detective Carver. We have a situation here and we need your help. What kind of situation? A 40-year-old woman was assaulted by her husband and is refusing to file a police report. She'll only talk to you. To me? Why? She said you saved her sister, Constance Shaw. Isabel's heart tightened. Constance had left the shelter 3 weeks earlier, after getting a stable job and a small apartment in the East Village. What's the woman's name? Lucy Shaw. She's here at the precinct with her 15-year-old daughter. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Isabel found Lucy in a private room at the station. The resemblance to Constance was striking. The same large, sad eyes, the same hunched posture of someone who had spent years hiding. The difference was that Lucy was visibly injured, with a purple bruise on her face and a cut lip. Lucy, I'm Isabel. Constance told me about you. The woman looked up, her eyes filling with tears. My sister said you would help me. Of course I'll help. But first I need to understand what happened. The story was tragically familiar. 15 years of a violent marriage, constant threats, terror of reporting it. Her daughter, Beatrice, had witnessed everything since she was a child. Why did you decide to come to the station today? Isabel asked. Because he hit her too, Lucy said, indicating her daughter. I could take him hitting me, but not my daughter. Isabel looked at Beatrice, who was silent in a chair in the corner. The teenager's eyes were swollen from crying. Beatrice, are you okay? I am, but I don't want to go back home anymore. And you won't, Isabel said firmly. We're going to get a restraining order and a safe place for you to stay. My husband said that if I filed a complaint he would kill me, Lucy murmured. He won't touch you, we'll make sure of it. Isabel spent the next 3 hours at the station, helping Lucy file the police report and making the necessary calls to get an emergency restraining order. When they left the station, it was already getting dark. "You'll stay at the shelter tonight," Isabel explained as they walked to the car. "Tomorrow we'll look at more permanent options." It was as they were approaching the parking lot that Isabel saw the man leaning against her car. Tall, thin, with an expression of anger she recognized immediately. It was the profile of a domestic abuser. "Lucy," she said quietly. "Is that him?" The woman froze when she saw her husband. "Wayne," she whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand. "So this is where you were," the man said, approaching, "gossiping about me to others." "Sir, you can't approach her," Isabel said, placing herself between Wayne and Lucy. "There's a restraining order." "Restraining order, my ass. My wife is coming home with me now." "She's not, and if you don't leave, I'm calling the police." Wayne took a threatening step toward Isabel. "And who are you to meddle in my family? Someone who won't let you lay a finger on them." Isabel was trying to dial 911 when Wayne pushed her violently. She fell to the ground, hitting her elbow on the asphalt. Beatrice screamed, "Mom, run!" But Lucy was paralyzed with fear. Wayne approached her with a clenched fist. "You embarrassed me, you tramp. Now you're going to pay." That's when a familiar voice cut through the air. "Take your hands off her." Isabel looked up and saw Cale approaching. He must have just arrived, because he was still dressed in his office suit. "Who's this schmuck?" Wayne asked. "Someone who's going to break your face if you don't back away from her now," Cale replied with a threatening calm. Wayne was taller than Cale, but there was something about the businessman that made the abuser hesitate. Maybe it was his posture, or the cold look in his eyes, or simply the certainty that he wasn't bluffing. "This is none of your business," Wayne said, but he was already backing away. "It became my business the moment you laid a hand on Isabel." Cale helped Isabel up, keeping his eyes fixed on Wayne. "Lucy, take Beatrice and get in my car, now." The two quickly obeyed. When they were safe, Cale turned to Wayne. "Now listen to me carefully. If you come near these women again, if you try to contact them, if you even think about them, I will find out. And when I find out, you will wish you had never been born. You can't threaten me. It's not a threat, it's a promise. And unlike you, when I make promises, I keep them." Wayne looked around, noticing that a few people had stopped to watch the commotion. Without another word, he walked away quickly. "How did you know where I was?" Isabel asked, still trembling with adrenaline. "John called me. He said you had left with 2 women and seemed worried. I thought I'd come see if everything was okay." "And I'm glad you did." They took Lucy and Beatrice to the shelter, where they were received by the night staff. After ensuring they were safe and comfortable, Isabel prepared to leave. "Can I take you home?" Cale offered. "My car is here." "Isabel, you're shaking. You shouldn't drive like this." It was true, her hands were trembling so much she could barely hold her keys. "All right." On the way to Isabel's apartment, they were silent. Only when he parked in front of her building did she speak. "Thank you for what you did back there." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved me. You saved them. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, anyone wouldn't have. And you know that." They sat in the car, not moving. "Cale," she said finally, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you still think about your sister every day?" He was surprised by the question. "Yes, every day." "And do you regret what you did?" "Every day, too." "But have you learned from it?" "I hope so." Isabel turned to look at him. "Today, when you saw I was in danger, what was your first instinct?" "To protect you." "And what was your second instinct?" "The same." "You didn't think about removing me from the situation, about making decisions for me, about sending me away to be safe?" Cale understood where she was going. "No, I thought about standing by your side." "Why?" "Because I learned that protecting someone doesn't mean removing them from their problems. It means being there when they face their problems." Isabel felt her eyes well up with tears. "You really did learn." "I did, in the most painful way possible." But I learned. Cale. Yes? I forgive you. The words hung in the air between them. Cale turned to look at her completely. You forgive me? For the lie. For the manipulation. For making decisions about my life without consulting me. I forgive everything. Why? Because today I saw that you've really changed. Because when I was in trouble, you showed up to stand by my side, not to solve everything for me. Isabel. And because a month without you made me realize that I don't want to spend the rest of my life running from love because of pride. Cale reached out and touched her face. Are you sure? Absolutely. But there are conditions. I'm listening. No more lies ever again. If you think you need to protect me from something, talk to me first. If you're afraid of something, tell me. If you want to control a situation, ask for my opinion. I promise. And I promise I will trust you, even when it's hard. And if I do, something stupid again, then I'll kill you. He laughed, and it was the first time in a month she had heard that sound. Can I kiss you now? He asked. You can, but then you're coming up with me. For what? To talk about the future, about us, about how we're going to make this work. And after the talk? After the talk, you're not leaving. He leaned in and kissed her, and Isabel felt as if all the pieces of her life were finally falling into the right place. 6 months later, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony in the garden of Cale's house, with only close family and a few friends. Isabel wore a simple white silk dress, and Cale couldn't stop smiling the entire day. Constance and Lucy were there with their children, representing all the women the shelter had helped. Margaret cried throughout the entire ceremony. Carla was the maid of honor and spent the whole time saying she knew they would end up together from day one. During the reception, as they danced their first song as husband and wife, Isabel whispered in Cale's ear, "No regrets." About marrying the most stubborn woman. In New York, never. And I don't regret marrying the most complicated man in America. We're a perfect match then. We are. On the other side of the garden, Anne Beatrice watched the couple with a genuine smile. She had brought a date, a nice doctor she had met a few weeks earlier. It was strange to see Cale so happy, but it was a good kind of strange. Fernanda approached her. They look good together, she said. They do. Isabel was the best thing that ever happened to him. And he to her, I've never seen her so happy. It was. True. Isabel radiated a joy that came from within, the kind of happiness that only happens when you find the right person to share your life with. Later that night, when all the guests had gone and they were finally alone, Cale and Isabel sat on the terrace of the house, watching the city lights. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how funny life is. If you hadn't shown up in my life the way you did, we probably never would have really met. Do you believe in fate? I don't know, but I think some people are made for each other. And when they meet, the universe conspires to keep them together, even when they do everything wrong. Especially when they do everything wrong. Cale pulled her closer, and she settled into his arms. Isabel? Thank you. For what? For not giving up on us, for giving me a second chance, for teaching me that love doesn't have to be complicated. Who said it isn't complicated? We're going to fight. We're going to disagree. We're going to have to solve a lot of problems. And that doesn't scare you? No, because now I know we'll solve everything together. They sat in silence, watching the city that had witnessed the beginning and the obstacles of their relationship. New York City stretched out as far as the eye could see, full of lives, stories, second chances. Cale? Yes? I love you. I love you too. Forever. And for the first time in her life, Isabel completely believed in forever. In the room where the photos of Cecilia had been kept, a small new frame had been added to the collection. It was a photo from the wedding with Cale and Isabel smiling radiantly in the garden. There was no sadness there, only love and hope. Cecilia would have approved. The shelter continued to operate and grow, becoming a national benchmark in serving women victims of violence. Isabel expanded the project to other cities, always with Cale's unconditional support. Together they created a foundation that had already helped thousands of women rebuild their lives. And every time a new resident arrived at the shelter, broken and without hope, Isabel remembered her own story. She remembered that sometimes love arrives in the most unexpected ways, through the most winding paths, and that it's worth fighting for. It's always worth fighting for love.